Let's face it, if you already knew everything about writing, would you really be watching this video? Contrary to many people's opinions on the matter, writing is a skill, not some innate talent that you either have or don't have. Most of the great writers out there weren't born being great writers. They got to where they are through practice and continual refinement of their skills. Behind every great piece of writing, there are likely hundreds of hours of practice. If you want to improve your writing, there are some concrete steps that you can take to actively do that. So here are 5 things you can do to help improve your writing. Tip number 1. Well, it's not really a tip. Step number 1, thing number 1, read or otherwise consume media. Reading is going to help you as a writer in a number of different ways. Some of these things will happen subconsciously, others require some active thought on your part. Reading other people's work is a good way to generate ideas for your own work. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that you should be completely ripping off other people's work. That's obviously not a good thing to do, but getting inspiration or incorporating different elements from stories you've read into your own work can be really effective. Reading can help you with the mechanical aspects of writing as well. Seeing how other authors move through a scene or write their descriptions or how they handle dialogue can help guide you in your own writing. This is the part that happens subconsciously. Your brain will read things that it likes, sentence structure, word choice, etc., and then you'll slowly start to subconsciously do these things in your own writing. You can give this process a hand by being a little more analytical in how you read. As you move through different passages, take note of how the author handles them. Look at how they handle action beats between dialogue sections or how they break up scenes. You can do this on a broader plot level as well. If you found a particular scene really interesting, or you found the twist at the end of a book really satisfying or really unsatisfying, go back and try to figure out why. By seeing how other authors do these things, you'll learn some of their tricks, which can then become your tricks. Speaking of things that are yours, tip number 2, consider your own personal style and voice. Every writer has their own distinct voice, subtle ways that their writing can be differentiated from somebody else's. And this is usually not something that's consciously developed. Which is why you shouldn't spend too much time worrying about your own style or voice. Spend enough time writing and it will eventually develop. That said, thinking about the general direction you want your writing to go can be very helpful. Look at your writing for its strengths and, more importantly, think about the ways that you like to write. Do you prefer more straightforward, simple prose, or do you skew to something a bit more literary? Do you like to follow characters around in a close cinematic way, or do you really let their thoughts and feelings come through on the page? How heavy are you with your dialogue? Do you use humor? How do you implement foreshadowing? What kind of tone do you want your writing to have? There's all kinds of different things that will make up your style and voice. Figuring out what those things are on your own is one way to do this, one way to slowly develop your own personal style. Another way is to see what other people pick up on in your writing, which coincidentally, tip number 3, edit your work and get feedback. Just like all great writers don't start out being great, a great piece of writing usually only becomes great after a lot of great editing and feedback. I should edit out some of the greats from that last line. If you want to improve as a writer, you need to address weaknesses in your writing, and editing is how you do that. The revision and editing process will help you pick up on any weak areas in your writing or areas that need to be improved. It can be hard to spot these problems in your writing while you're actually writing. That's why revision is so important. Knowing what problems crop up in your writing will help you to prevent those problems from happening in the future. And the best way to discover those problems is to revise and edit your work. This is one area where getting some help from some other people can be really helpful. Getting feedback, whether from your critique partners, your editor, or your beta readers, is crucial to finding out where you as a writer need to improve. Just like with editing, this will help you to find problems in your work and address those problems in the future. These are both very broad subjects in their own right, so I'm not going to go into detail about either editing or getting feedback right now. Probably going to save those for future videos. In fact, I might have said I was going to talk about editing in a video like 2 months ago and never did, so maybe I should get on that. Anyway, understand that these are two very important processes that should not be overlooked, like how I overlooked writing a segue to the next tip. Tip number 4, study and understand story structure. Writing at its core is a wholly emotional endeavor. Stories are nothing but a tool to trigger a bunch of different emotions in the reader. Now, emotional responses vary based on a million different factors. That is why two people can have wildly different opinions on the same story, and why it's impossible to really quantify how good a particular story is. With this fact in mind, it's a little surprising that there are so many plot structures and story archetypes and tropes out there that get used frequently and still generate good results. That's because in spite of the variability of emotional responses out there, certain patterns, when done correctly, tend to elicit the same emotional response in the reader. That's why these patterns are used so frequently and have become such well-known story structures. Now, whether these structures work because of cultural norms or because they reach some deep level of fundamental human psychology is not my point. Why and how they work is not as important as the fact that they do work. While we may not understand necessarily why a structure works, we can know its purpose and what emotional response it's supposed to create in the reader. If you want to improve as a writer, it's important not to ignore common plot structures. On the other end of the spectrum, you also don't want to follow them too feverishly. Instead, you should study plot archetypes and story structures to try and understand the purpose that they serve for the story, what it is that this structure does. Once you grasp what a structure does and the emotional response that it's meant to elicit, you can decide if adapting your story to this plot structure is worthwhile. There's a whole bunch of these structures out there. Honestly, it's a bit of a mess because there's not a surefire way to classify these things, but spend some time studying them and see if there's something you can glean that might be useful in your own writing. Speaking of, tip number 5. To improve your writing, spend more time writing. This one, I would imagine, is fairly obvious. It's also by far the most important tip on this list. Like, seriously, you could ignore everything else I've said today as long as you follow this advice here. Consistently practicing your writing is the most important step to becoming a better writer. Now, this is something that a lot of people find difficult to do. It can be hard to find time to write, and writing can be hard at times. Writing every day is great if you have time to do it. A lot of people don't. Having a consistent schedule or time where you write throughout the week, even if it's only for an hour or so, is really what's important. I've done some videos about writing habits and also about how to write more and also about motivation. You can check those out if you want some help with this. But I think the best advice is to focus on being consistent rather than worrying about how many words you're writing or how much time you're spending writing. Also, don't worry if the quality of your writing isn't where you'd like it to be. The whole point of this process is to practice. Writing is a skill, and to get good at it, you need to spend time practicing. There's really not much more to say about it, which is good because we're at the end of the video. I think the biggest takeaway from this is I should limit my videos to 3 tips, as this was a pain to write and I'm not looking forward to editing it. The path to becoming the writer that you want to be is a long one. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of practice, a lot of attention, a lot of focus. There's really no substitute for putting the effort in. You have to spend the time in order to do it. The tips on this list might help you get there a little bit faster or make your efforts more focused and more productive. But you need to put that effort in the first place. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.